Is it time?
Oh, vacation. Thank you. It's nice for her to send in that
Calling
clip.
in from Cannes.
From Cannes, yes, she is. Getting ready for, no, I guess that's next year, the film festival. Time for, we call it News You Can't Use. It's more of a cooler item we want to talk about here. It's a new piece in Vanity Fair about Sarah Palin. We're going to be talking to the author of that piece coming up a little bit later on Morning Joe. It's called Sarah Palin, The Sound and the Fury by Michael Joseph Gross. It's a scathing, epic piece.
Thick.
It is. It's thick.
5 pages.
Among other things, says she's a bad tipper, says she gets in violent fights inside her home with the first dude, says she's completely disconnected from her hometown now. The list goes on and on. Also accuses her, of all things, of lying about her past as a hunter. Here's a quote from one of many anonymous sources in the piece. This whole hunter thing for Sarah, that is the biggest fallacy, says one longtime friend of the family. That woman has never hunted. The picture of her with the caribou she says she shot, she got out of the RV to pose for a picture. She never helped with the fishing either. It's all a joke. The friend goes on to recall that when Greta Van Susteren came to the house to interview Palin, quote, Sarah cooked moose chili and whatnot. Todd was calling everyone he knew the day before, do you got any moose? Desperate. Sarah Palin took to Twitter to respond kind of vaguely. She wrote, when yellow journalism gets ratcheted up for a period of time over an individual or an issue, it makes you wonder, what's up? What's the threat?
Good question.
Mike Barnacle, you read the piece. What were your first reactions?
You know, I'm at the point now where, I'm convinced that Sarah Palin is very happy, probably the happiest she's ever been in her life, because she's making $15 million a year. Give her a good leaving alone for a while. It's something we are unable to do, but, leave her alone.
I know you read through some of it. Were you surprised by any of the details in here, having covered Sarah Palin pretty extensively yourself?
There's no question that the rapidity of her ascent, the suddenness of putting her on the ticket, unlike most other national figures who get to be on the Republican ticket after years of reportorial scrutiny, she's still really a new face in American life. And so there are going to be reporters who are going to go back and talk to people in her hometown and other places she's been and find people coming forward. For most politicians, this happens over an extended period of years. For her, it's coming out, and we're going to see this as long as she continues to be a national phenomenon.
The shooting star syndrome.
Yeah.
And the thread throughout this piece is that no one wanted to talk on the record. It was like they were asked to talk about Suge Knight or something. I'm not going to talk about it. Are you crazy? Let's go out on something else, shall we?
May this day be the change point. Look around you. You're not alone. You are Americans. Let's stand together. Let's stand with honor. Let's restore America.
Will she or won't she? The guessing game over Sarah Palin's potential run for the presidency rages on. Here with us now from New York Magazine, Gabriel Sherman, and from Vanity Fair, Michael Gross. Both give an inside look at the former governor of Alaska. Gabriel reports on why one advisor thinks Palin will not run in 2012. Here's part of what he writes. My reasoning is as follows. She hated what was happening in public office. She hated her life. She hated it. Now she has the world by the tail. She's speaking to adoring crowds. Maybe only 20% of the people like her, but they adore her. She's smart enough to know the chances of getting elected very, very slim. Now she has the money she needs. She has the best of both worlds. But if Palin decides to take the plunge into the next presidential election, she'll have to face questions about the image she promoted during the 2008 campaign. Here's what Michael writes in part. This whole hunter thing for Sarah, that is the biggest fallacy, says one longtime friend of the family. That woman has never hunted. The picture of her with the caribou she says she shot, she got out of the RV to pose for a picture. She never helps with the fishing either. It's all a joke. The friend goes on to recall that when Greta Van Susteren came to the house to interview Palin, quote, Sarah cooked moose chili and whatnot. Todd was calling everyone he knew the day before. You got any moose? Desperate. Wow, so much to talk about here. Welcome to you both.
Thanks. Thank you.
Let's start with you, Gabe. The conventional wisdom, at least from people who come on this set is that she's going to run. But you say otherwise.
Well, I agree. I mean, what I tried to do is there was a lot of talk over the last few days of this upcoming Iowa trip she has as the sort of first concrete evidence that she's stepping into the 2012 race. And what I did is I talked to the people around her who say there's really no ramping up. There's no infrastructure being built. She's not actually taking any steps to build a viable political operation. And this Iowa trip, the only thing that we know for certain that it does is it gets people like us to talk about her. And that's the important point, is she's very savvy at stepping into the limelight and getting the media to talk about her, which boosts her media career. And that's the only thing she seems to be doing right now.
Michael, you address in part this fascination everyone seems to have, whether you love her or hate her, with Sarah Palin. There's some tough stuff in the piece. The thread that got me was the fear to a man to speak on the record about Sarah Palin. It seems like you found that from everyone you talked to would only speak to you anonymously.
Almost everyone, that's right. There is a string of people going all the way back in her life, all the way back in her career, who have been so abused so horrifically by her, and they're just terrified of retribution. They've seen her take revenge on people before, and they're so broken, they're so stepped on, they're so beaten down that they don't want to take the risk of speaking out.
Like how? How would they be broken? What kind of retribution?
There's one employee who worked for her as mayor who she continually tortured and taunted until the woman quit her job, sought psychiatric counseling, and left the state to escape Palin's influence. There's, of course, the story of the trooper Mike Wooten, which led to Troopergate. That's the first thing that everybody mentions when I ask if she's actually had people fired from their jobs. But there are a lot of smaller stories about circulating rumors, about ruining people. That's a favorite phrase of hers. She told one aide after the campaign ended, "I have the power to ruin you."
The portrait, though, that you paint is almost so extreme. It's almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of dichotomy.
The worst stuff isn't even in there. I couldn't believe these stories either when I first heard them. And I started this story with a prejudice in her favor. I have a lot in common with this woman. I'm a small-town person. I'm a Christian. I think that a lot of her criticisms of the media actually have something to them, and I figured she'd gotten a bum ride. But everybody close to her tells the same story.
Gabe, how important do you think it is in terms of Sarah Palin today, the fact that she's making a lot of money? For the first time in her life, she is financially set for perhaps the rest of her life.
I think it's extremely important, and I think what feeds into that, to make a lot of money, she needs to be seen as a viable presidential candidate. Every comment she makes on Twitter and Facebook is infused with this guessing game. Well, what does this mean for the election? Is she going to run? Is she not going to run? And so her business model depends on people like us thinking she's going to run for president.
So what is it? What is it that has fueled this fascination for 2 years? 2 solid years, and you can say she's very savvy. I think it borders on genius, the way she manages to get herself in the news every single day almost.
I mean, I think this fascination is that she doesn't play by any of the prescribed rules of traditional politics. I mean, Michael documents it very well in his piece. I mean, she is a North Star. She beats to her own drum. I mean, there's nothing about her that any of us can sort of wrap our heads around, and then so we scratch our heads. Well, what is she? And is she a media person? Is she a politician? Is she both? Is she, the second coming of Richard Nixon? I mean, we don't know.
What do you think the odds are, Michael, that in 3 years from now we'll be saying, whatever happened to Sarah Palin?
Well, I think it depends a lot on what people around this table decide to do. If we decide to keep listening to these Facebook and Twitter postings, to keep accepting that, to keep treating her like a celebrity and a pop star instead of a politician, she's probably going to still be around. If we decide to let her keep lying and getting away with it, she's going to still be around. But if we start returning to the standard that a politician has to talk to people, with people, not just to people, and a politician has to tell the truth, then she's out of here because she can't stand up up to that.
Which lies are you talking about? Which ones troubled you most as you covered her?
This is a person for whom there is no topic too small to lie about. In Wichita, I heard her give a speech where she claimed that when she first found out that she was pregnant with Trig, she was scared because she'd never been around a special needs child before. Well, when she describes the exact same moment in her book, she says that the first thought was of her own nephew, who's a special needs child, who's autistic. She lies about everything. She lies about her personal life. She lies about
even if you take that as a given, and she's an easy target, and she's been made a target by a lot of people, would we be wrong to dismiss these adoring crowds? These are people, you may say, they don't get it, they don't understand that she's lying, they don't get that she didn't know who Margaret Thatcher was. You may think all those things, but these are people who feel that in the standard political spectrum, they have not found anyone they can relate to, and they relate to her. And would we be foolish? Would political parties be foolish to be dismissive of that? There's a lot of candidates who've gone by the wayside who maybe were dismissive of her, and yet in this past election cycle, she's supported them and they've won.
I mean, I think ultimately her role for the next presidential election will be as a kingmaker role in the Republican primary, because she has that support. She has those 2 million followers that when she says move, they move. And any candidate who's running needs her. I mean, her endorsement in a Republican primary could be gold. And I think if she hangs out there and doesn't run, but plays that kingmaker role, that's where she preserves her utmost power without getting sort of taken down by the process.
Michael, you could have predicted this while you were writing it, but some people are already calling your article a hit piece, a hatchet job, the media out again to get Sarah Palin. How do you respond to that criticism?
Oh, it's exactly the opposite. As I said before, I started this with every good intention toward her. I was just shocked and appalled at every step at what I found, and I wrote this story, sort of against my will. It wasn't what I wanted to write. It wasn't what I wanted to find. It was what was forced on me by the facts.
Were you rebuffed or refused the opportunity to speak with her directly?
Yes, many times. I tried through all sorts of avenues. I went to her beauty shop one day when she was there and left a note with her hairdresser. I left a note with her dad. I got in touch with Sarah Pack, and all I would get was emails saying that my request had been taken under consideration. They asked for questions. I sent them questions. Again, no answers.
If she's this person with this terribly volatile temper and she's so mean to people, why do you think that so many people around her stick with her? And the loyalty is incredible. They won't speak to the outside.
No,
they won't speak to media.
But in fact, most people around her have not stuck with her. I mean, what's most fascinating to me of all of this is that at exactly the same time that her influence is expanding exponentially, her world is shrinking almost to a point. She has kicked almost everyone out of the inner circle. The remaining group is so small, and almost all of them are people that she's just gotten to know in the last year or two. It's quite extraordinary.
Michael Gross, it's a good read. You can read it and make your own decisions about Sarah Palin in Vanity Fair. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Gabe Sherman, great piece by you too in New York Magazine. Check them both out. Coming up.
Suppose Senator John Doe puts forth a constitutional amendment that would outlaw abortion, even in cases of rape or incest, and he asked you to attend the announcement and support him in that. Would you do it?
I would. Yes, a proposal like that, I would stand by it.
Let's be completely clear about the facts here. There is no place in the world and no time in history where restricting women's reproductive rights makes a people or a nation more free or more equal. These extreme positions on abortion are, without any question, a war on American girls and women, and the fact that there are women who are both complicit and participatory in it is really neither surprising nor unprecedented. It has always been true, and it is incredibly important that we recognize that despite the fact that we can be very proud of these women and as politicians, that the question is, how do women as citizens fare on the other side of them either being elected or not elected?